Welcome again to Joe Stunner Boxing. I hope you're doing well. The sun is out, which is always a good thing, and the weekend is upon us, which is always a good thing. But I want to talk about a serious subject today. There was an article in Boxing News a couple of weeks ago. It was only a small article. They have a section called Yesterday's Heroes, and the article was on a couple of fighters who basically were victims of the Holocaust. They were professional fighters who ended up in concentration camps and were essentially, well, they were murdered, okay, along with 12 million others. So I wanted to talk a bit about them. In fact, not just the two that were mentioned in this article, but another couple maybe as well. But of the ones that were mentioned in the article, one of them was actually a German fighter, a gypsy, a Romani gypsy, member of the Sinti tribe, who are originally from Africa, I believe. He was persecuted, and his name was Johann Trollman, and he ended up with a professional record. This is according to BoxRec. I'm going to go by BoxRec's records because, as always, they're open to dispute to some extent, but generally speaking, they're pretty accurate. So Johann Trollman, he ended up with 31 wins, 11 KOs, 19 defeats, 7 by stoppage, and 14 draws. And, that's a pretty decent record. He was a German guy. He turned professional in 1929, and he had his last professional fight in 1934. So he crammed all of those, as is the case with the old timers, he crammed all those fights into a mere 5 years. But then, of course, as a Romani gypsy, when the Nazis took over, which would have been 1933, he became, one of the persecuted. And I've got the actual article here. I just want to read you a little section from it. Within 3 months of Hitler taking over, which would have been January 1933, Trollman was matched with a guy called Witt, Adolf Witt. Okay, now he was this was for the German title, and Trollman was matched with Witt in a contest for the German light heavyweight title. He was well on the way to a clear victory over his opponent when Nazi officials intervened and demanded that the contest be declared a no contest. They were not happy to see a Romani fighter demonstrating clear dominance over an Aryan opponent. The two men boxed through the remaining rounds and with no winner being declared. And the winner apparently would have been Trollman. And then from then on, Trollman's career was beset with problems, it says, all of which were caused by the political regime. And by 1934, he'd had enough and he packed it in for good. Then at the outbreak of the war, which was 1939, Trollman signed to fight for the Wehrmacht, the German army, and after serving for 3 years, the rules changed and he suddenly found himself to be an alien. So they were like, no, we don't want no gypsies in the German army. Out you go. Because of his Romani background, he was arrested and thrown into the Neuengamme concentration camp, where he was forced to box against all and sundry for the entertainment of the guards. After beating one of them in a fair fight, he was beaten to death with a shovel, becoming one of the 6 million victims of the Holocaust. It's actually 12 million, but no. In 2003, the German Boxing Federation finally recognised him as the German light heavyweight champion due to his 1933 victory over Adolf Witt. Or Witt, perhaps. So he was in the concentration camp. This would have been 1943, and the information that we have comes from an Austrian author called Felix Mitterer. He wrote a play about Trollman. It premiered in Vienna in 2015, and his research showed that Trollman was forced to box in the camp and was beaten to death with a shovel. And of course, at that particular time, 1943, he would have been in the camp for some years. Probably his initial fitness kept him alive, but of course he would have been in no fit state to resist against armed guards, and they just smashed him to bits. They killed him. The losers of the fights, by the way, were often shot minutes after the contest. So. Okay, so there's that. And now another fighter who was a victim of the Holocaust was a guy called Johann Perez. And whereas Trollman was a very good European level fighter, Perez was, he's from Tunisia. He's only 5'1" tall, little guy. But he was an extremely good fighter. In fact, he was, I believe, world lightweight champion at one point. And he ended his career with 94 wins, 29 KOs, 32 defeats with 9 KOs, and 16 draws. And this guy was a good fighter, a very, very good fighter. He turned professional in 1928 and concluded his professional career in 1941. So again, 13 years, he had all those fights, 100 and whatever, 40 fights, whatever it was. But he met a very similar fate to Trollman. He was, I think he fought some British fighters. Let me look at this article. I'm sure he did. I might mention it here. Yeah, Perez was a far more notable fighter. He made his name fighting in and around Paris during the 1920s, and in 1931 knocked out the American Frankie Gennaro in 2 rounds at the Palais de Sport Paris to win the world flyweight title. Yeah, he was flyweight champ. He was a sensation and a hero in the Parisian suburbs, where Tunisians, Algerians and Moroccans celebrated him becoming one of the first African world champions. He is remembered in this country, for his loss to Mickey Maguire, a Geordie who knocked him out in 2 rounds inside Newcastle's New St James Hall in 1932, and in a match made at £2 above the flyweight limit. Okay. And a week before, Perez had lost his world title to Jackie Brown of Manchester in January 1945. Now, he was shot to death by the Nazis while on a death march from Auschwitz after he was seen trying to distribute bread to fellow prisoners. If you don't know what a death march was, when it became apparent that the Nazis had lost the war, all the people from the concentration camps were forced to just march away from the camp. So we're talking hundreds of miles, people who are suffering from malnutrition and also typhus and all sorts and they were just dropping down dead. And if you fell over and you couldn't march, you were just shot where you sat. In the case of young Perez, he was shot trying to give bread to fellow prisoners. Another example would be probably quite a famous example, if you've seen a film called Triumph of the Spirit, would be a Greek fighter called Salamo, I believe his name was Salamo Arouch. And Triumph of the Spirit, now I saw this film. This was a biographical take on Arouch. And it was released in 1989. It starred Willem Dafoe as Arouch. I saw this in a London cinema. 1989. I saw it when it was released. Oh, Jesus Christ, that's 34 years ago. Jesus, I'm old. And I always remember it as being one of those films where it contained a lot of horror in it, real life horror. Because Arouch was another guy who ended up in Auschwitz and was forced to fight for the entertainment of officers against other prisoners. Jewish guy. And he was kept alive essentially as entertainment for the officers. Like I say, Willem Dafoe was the star. Edward James Olmos was in it. Robert Loggia was in it. You may know these actors if you're a little bit older. Very good character actors. But what I remember about the film was that the horrors of Auschwitz and the horrors of how they were treated were sort of presented in a very sort of matter-of-fact way, which in a sense accentuated the horror. And I believe Willem Dafoe was trained by Teddy Atlas. I read Teddy Atlas's biography, and I remember him saying that he actually helped Willem Dafoe get in shape and train for the role. And Dafoe's very good in it. It's a very matter-of-fact, no-nonsense, no-frills film. But when people talk about their favourite boxing movies, go and have a look at this one, Triumph of the Spirit, it's called. And I think I read the book, which is about Arouch's about his life. It goes into more detail, obviously. And if I remember right, I read the book after I saw the film, and I remember thinking that the book or the film was pretty accurate compared to the book, if you know what I mean. Salamo Arouch again was the name of the fighter. But another example, he survived the war. He did survive the war, and I believe he lived to be quite a ripe old age. But I can't remember how old he was. But he did. I know he survived the war, and he was able to tell his story, unlike Trollman and Perez. Yeah, and there were other fighters. There are other fighters, other boxers that end up in the camps as well and die in the camps. But that's just three for you. Three examples of fighters that were victims of the Holocaust, and of course that obscene crime that we should never forget. Do not let history repeat itself. So yeah, if you know of any others, leave them below in the comments. If maybe you've read books about them or seen documentaries that I haven't. I think it's a very interesting subject. Yeah, let me know your thoughts, and if you're new to the channel, subscribe. That would be good. Like the video if you liked it, hit the like button and spread the word about Joe Stunner Boxing. And as always, thank you for your time. Here's the weekend, it's coming around the corner looking at us. Got some good boxing on as well. I'll be doing some videos on the boxing over the weekend. Until then, see you soon, bye for now.